And I'm going to record the start. Do you have any question for us?
Should in case, yeah, I have a question. Should in case you decide to hire me, what are your expectations of me within the first 6 months of me working as a DBA in your company? And another question is, what are your company's culture and tradition?
I want you to ask me 5 questions.
That's 2. What so for now I have just the 2, please.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's clap for Grace. Come on.
Grace, you have only 2 questions. You don't even know our environment. You want to come in and walk in, and you're not even interested in no Grace. Huh?
Grace, you should go there. Look, let me give room for other people to say 1 or 2, and then I'll give conclusive review. I know we're running out of time, but let me start with you, Zelda. Anything from you?
Yes. Let me thank you so much, Grace, for the time. And I have some few, maybe some few tips to give you. You have how long do you have your interview? When is it? How many days from tomorrow? Oh, okay.
There's one on Thursday.
You might need to sleep on top of your book and do a lot of maybe revise a lot of those monitoring tools and performance tuning. You have to be able to tell them that you are actually coming to secure the data. And when they ask you like security, when Doc asks about security, you definitely must not talk about the masking. You have so many things that you can talk about security, like the first document the company will give you when you start working is a document to secure this, to maybe enforce security in their system. And enforcing TDA is just maybe one of those. That by even just telling them that you use best practices, you will use your best practice to install SQL in their environment. You make sure that every user signing in is using Windows sign, not the SQL or mixed mode authentication. You want all of them to use the Windows authentication for security reasons. You may want to tell them about changing your POP number. Those are security measures. You don't have to hang on those data masking, because it becomes extremely difficult to talk about something that you've not done practically, So when you go there and you're not able to express yourself and you're not able to defend it, that's where they'll touch you down. Go to a position, maybe to an environment where you can actually defend yourself. Tell them you're able to create audits in the environment that will monitor, sign in and sign out. And in that way, the company will always be able to see who has signed into the server and who has done what and at what time. Those are some of the security measures that they take when you start off job. Change all the port numbers except for the default, and you make sure that you install this in drives, you divide your drives. So these are the things that you walk them through this process. And you don't just stick on that this main security reasons like TDE, like you mentioned. There's another thing I think was on, about the server being down. It's a practical thing. I must tell you, I think you must read about that, because you might likely get something in that direction. A server down is a big problem for the company, and in a single minute, it's a big loss. So what's your thing? What will you do when you hear this? You have to actually just start acting. You start acting. First of all, before you go questioning, you need to check. You will go on your configuration manager. You see if all the SQL agents are running, the services are running. That's the first step. That's your first step where you go. Why is the server down? Go to the configuration manager. Is the services up and running? If they are stopped, you start those services, and then you start troubleshooting. A good DBA is one that troubleshoots, and the first troubleshooting aspect should be even starting with event viewer, just an event viewer. a tool that will give you an overview of errors in your machine for the past whatever time. That's something that can guide you through, and you will be able to see at this particular point, the server was down. And why was it down? You will trace it back. You know, from there, you'll be able to trace it back. You can even use your SQL logs, your error logs. You can go into your server and you check those one, and it will give you an overview. You know, like each time SQL Server gets started, and a SQL error log is being created. So you go there, you see all of them be stated, and you have to check the last one, and you see that the server was down or the server was restarted at this point, meaning you will follow up that sequence and you know at what time it went down. Now going in to check who did what and whatever, you have to use other monitoring tools to get that right. You have so many of those. Try to grab some of the monitoring tools and put them to your fingertips. There is no interview I ever attended as my own personal experience that they never asked me about monitoring tools. Yes. Tell me about your monitoring tools. What tools do you use in your environment? Why do you use those ones and why not these ones, you know? So try to talk about them like somebody who has used them every blessed day, you know? Get some confidence in that. You don't have to don't shy away. Just develop some confidence, talk with some boldness, and defend whatever you are saying. So that they see, even if you say something wrong, but you are bold enough, the people might buy your idea, you know? So, and then again, managing storage is something, maybe Doug will talk a little bit more on that. It's also very important for you to know how to manage storage in the environment, because it's a problem we face almost every blessed day, and you keep getting alerts, and it gets annoying if you even don't know how to start by, you know, to reclaim all your space. So you have to master that, talk about it with a lot of confidence and enthusiasm. Yeah. Okay. There are so many things that I wrote down, but maybe along the line I can come in. So let me pass the mic back to Doc.
Yeah, we are out of time, but I will still create time so we can just answer these questions for them, because that's what really matters. I can already see a lot of people say we need answers. We need answers. Yes, we're going to give you the answers the way we feel like the question should have been addressed. Yes, Laurie, is there anything that you asked that was not properly answered you want to talk about?
I would just give advice to go those little questions, you know, little definitions. And when you've been asked a question about the definition, yes, give the definition and try to put it as a professional, somebody has been there for a long time. Just don't give a definition as a book, like you're just learning, you just like Doc would say, academy answer. Try to put it that way, and then you give an example. That's the only thing that actually will bring it up. And I'm not going to take that much time, Doc. Thank you so much.
All right. Yes, Zebs. Thanks, Laurie.
Yeah, I want to give, I'm giving a feedback too, because Grace is going in for a real business now. It's no longer issues of going and doing hanky-panky or kind of thing, right? So you, first of all, you need to be, confident for yourself. You know that the way the answers are coming is like a trial and error method, which it doesn't work. You are going in for that job. You are not the only person. You are fighting to beat. It's like a wrestling in a wrestling ring, where if the person knocks the other person, you take the trophy and you go home. So now that you are going in there, first of all, you know, like when they ask a question, you can't answer like it's. Let's say no. You have to. You are working in the field. You should be saying it. We should not be. Let's say this. No, you are going in there as the real DBA. You have to speak SQL. Who you don't come into a database and use the database, right? Maybe you are looking into the database, right? So you have to speak a language that makes you make them feel that you are working. Don't speak a language of somebody who are just from the school and trying to cram what he's trying to say or trying to read from an internet, because maybe it's not face to face, and maybe you are sitting and you don't know what are you seeing in front of you. They may be suspecting you are trying to read in the internet or trying to read something, you know. That is something you need to take it serious. And I know these questions that they're asking, they are not new things. They are things that you have heard, right? So, and some of the questions we are asking are also questions we have had when we are also sitting in an interview, right? So the confidence level, no matter how the answer is whether true or bad, let's answer it with confidence. Let's be very, very audible and confidence for yourself. The answer will be wrong, but the person will see the way you have your courage. You don't know, you may not know what the employer is looking for. He's not only looking for somebody who's who has the knowledge so much, but he's looking for other aspects in you, So that's some of the things that I will talk about them. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for those feedback. I'm just going to add to what the other panelists have already said. I'm starting with the security question, right? On that security question, from what Zada already mentioned, that you don't have to, this was an open book check. I'm giving you a piece of paper and say, write any amount in it. I did not specify what you should write. So whenever you have this open book question, make sure that you really tackle the most important point. Yes, you can start off by going gradually. Don't just rush. How do you secure an environment? First, if I walk into an environment, the first thing that I will do as a DBA is to make sure that I implement Microsoft best practices in everything that happens there, because Microsoft best practices are there to make sure the environment is secure. One, I will make sure that that environment has multiple environments. That's one, right? If I walk in and this company has just production, it means that developers are everybody is connected to prod, right? I want to ensure that at least there are multiple environments that will be there for other people that don't need access to prod to be able to do their things. For example, depending on the budget, I could create maybe a testing environment, a UAT or prod. At least there should be some production or non-production environment for other stuff. What is the security risk in this part is that I try to minimize those that don't have access to prod to be able to test their things without affecting prod. Two, I want to be able to make sure that when I'm applying patches that have to deal with security, I don't just rush and apply them in prod. I have to test this, apply it in other environment that if that patch even had a problem, I'll be able to identify it before it hits production. That's one way. Reason why I want to have multiple environments. Okay, and then I can always do data refresh for any developer that needs to test their codes, is developing their codes. I can get a copy from production and restore it in that non-prod environment for them to do their work. Okay, now I will make sure that I implement the principle of least privileges. I didn't hear you talk about that word. In granting logins, principle of least privileges, you have the option to explain more or not, depending on how far you've been talking. I can just say, I'm going to apply the principle of least privileges in every access that I grant in this environment. And every single access must go through a ticket. The ticket must be submitted for any access to be granted. And that ticket must be approved by upper management, either by my manager or any other person that directly owns that application. Let's say I have 10 different applications. In corporate world, every application has an application owner. If someone says, I need access to this database, and I know this database is connected by this application connected to the database, then I need to make sure that the application owner is okay, me giving them access to that particular user. And if someone just walks up to you and says, I need sysadmin, no, principle of least privileges. What do you need it for? Okay. Can this thing be done with lower privileges? Can you do this same task using just read only? Okay, that's what the principle of least privileges says. I'm only going to give you as much right as you need to perform that task. Okay, and all this needs to go through a ticket. And I'm using ServiceNow for my ticket. You see how you're putting yourself like someone who's really working out there, not just talking. Okay, once that ServiceNow ticket comes to my desk and is approved, I will go ahead and grant that permission. Okay. Okay. Now I'll also make sure that my database at the database level that applies securities on the server. And you can mention some of these like TDE, transparent data encryption, dynamic data masking, or always encrypted. You don't have to go in and explain how TDE works or how transparent data encryption works, except there's a follow-up question on that. Then you can talk about that. I'll also make sure that access to databases is through groups, security groups. I don't want to grant any individual access to the database unless specified. Okay. And also, still at the level of access, I will make sure that I limit access to my database through Windows authentication because it's much secure than SQL Server authentication. But then I will make sure that any individual or any user that requests for SQL Server authentication to my database, there must be justification why. Why do you need SQL Server authentication? Can you not do the same task using Windows authentication? Because there are some applications that cannot work with Windows authentication. Then you will have to go ahead and grant SQL authentication. It's only when I have justifiable reason approved by upper management that I'm going to grant you system SQL Server authentication. And once I have to do Windows authentication, it must be through a security group. Meaning that a ticket will be created on my ServiceNow ticket, which will be sent to the AD team, Active Directory team. The user is created in the Active Directory, and then I can go ahead and grant that user access to a database using principle of least privileges. So this is still on security. Okay. I'll also make sure as a database administrator that my servers are patched regularly. When Microsoft releases all these patches, I want to make sure that they're patched. Why do you even patch a server? You patch servers because when Microsoft releases a new product, things are changing. Security flaws. Microsoft is constantly fixing this thing and is releasing these fixes through a patch. So you have to make sure that you patch these servers regularly. And how do you patch? That's why you need two environments, because you need to, first of all, test this patch in lower environment. Once this patch has no issue, you can then roll it to prod, and then no problem. Okay, so this is how you can tackle this, and you can go on and on and on. But at least in an interview, if you go this far, you should be good on that question of security. Still on this security, is there any question? I see a hand of Flora. Is it still linked with security before we move to the next point?
Yes, it's regarding the patching. How often can we apply the patching? And does it require any downtime?
Patches do require downtime because every single time you patch a server, you need to reboot the server. So you cannot patch a server during production hours. How often do you patch server? Once a month. It depends on whether you're doing a window patch or SQL Server patch. If it's a window patch, Microsoft releases patches when? When do they do that, Grace?
Every second Tuesday of the
Every
month.
2 weeks.
Or patch Tuesday. Every second Tuesday of the month, Microsoft releases window patches.
Yep.
And these window patches don't just hit production. That's why you need multiple environments, because this is the month of November. Second Tuesday of the month is tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
November will be released tomorrow. You will not take that patch and apply it in production. Production should always be a few months behind. Meaning for this month, we're going to apply the patches that were released in September.
Oh, September. Oh, okay.
For other environment like dev, I'm going to apply this month patch in dev. So that at least I have 2 months to correct it if there's a problem. Security reason. I can fix it, and then by January, the patch that was released this month will not hit production.
Yeah.
That's the way you apply these patches. But for SQL Server patches, you do it every 6 months. Company will tell you every 6 months or once a year, or every single time you have a new application, new installation coming in, you need to apply SQL Server patches before you conclude that you're done with the installation. Okay, now on that question, server is down. Zelda already mentioned a few things on why the server is down, right? But when you just hear the word server is down, as a proactive DBA, this is how you should answer the question. As a proactive DBA, I'm going to put on monitoring tools in place to make sure that I'm notified about these issues. I should not come to work and someone calls me and say the server is down. I should be notified, meaning I might set up text messages, emails that call me or any other way, pagers that notify the team or whoever is on call when a server is down. And when I hear server is down, the first thing I need to do is I need to first of all even check, can I log into the server? Maybe through RDP remote desktop connection. If I cannot log on to that server, then I need to ping that server and open a command prompt or a PowerShell and ping that server to see if the ping responds. If it doesn't respond, then I'm actually sure that that server is down. Okay. So at that moment, the DBA, there's nothing you can do as far as finding out whether that server, what is the reason. So you will need to talk to the Windows team to figure out why the server is down, so that at least they can bring back the server online. So that ping or you trying to log on, if those two things fail, we have to now get other teams involved. If I do ping or if I log on and the server is actually on, it could actually be that the server is not down, but SQL Server is down. User can no longer connect, applications are failing, they're not able to connect. So what do I need to do? I will first of all check configuration manager. Is SQL Server running? If SQL Server is up and running, I'm going to try to connect to a server and then open a query and just run a random select statement against the database. Does it return any value or not? Because you as a database administrator, you have to make sure that you eliminate this thing at your own level. It's not your problem. You have to make sure that this problem is maybe coming from a different side. So long as you have not eliminated that, you have a variable that has not been solved. So you need to make sure that on the database side, everything is fine. Then we have that variable closed. We can now move to the next stage, begin to figure out why users are not able to connect. So I am trying to make sure SQL Server has no issues. Queries are returning well. There's no problem. If that is the thing, I need to log on to the server and check the log, SQL Server logs. Is there any login failure? Because maybe that person is just trying to connect with the wrong username and password. SQL does audit all that and it saves it on SQL Server error log. You'll be able to see that XYZ is trying to connect, but password is wrong or so on. Right? If I don't see any of that, then the next thing I need to figure out is this person even reaching the server? It could be that there's some firewall rule that is blocking this person. He's not even reaching the server. So how do I verify if this person is even reaching the server? Because on the SQL Server log, if there is no failed errors, nothing that shows that this person is trying to connect and the connection is not going through, I need to make sure that this person can reach the database server. So I'll ask the person to go to application server, open the command prompt, and ping the database server. So when you ping the database server, does it respond? Yes or no? So if it doesn't respond, it means that the database server and the application server are not even communicating. So that individual, that person cannot connect because they're not communicating at all. Now I'm going to verify, is there any firewall rule between the database server and application server that might be blocking the connection from going through? Okay, so I need to verify that. Now, once I do that, sometimes you will do all this verification and there is really nothing happening unless the fact that you just have to reboot SQL Server. Sometimes a reboot can really work. Or sometimes make sure that application is up and running, the user is connected with the right username and password, and so on. Next thing, when I do all this on my side, I'm verifying that database has no issue. Now, I'll now start going out, spreading my wings to verify what actually happened. Was there any change? You know, that could have stopped all this. So the reboot should always be the last thing that you want to do on this. Okay, so that's how you might want to go ahead to look at this question on server down or user not able to connect to SQL Server. Now, the next question I asked you was, which application have you supported so far? You cannot go into an interview having worked for XY amount of years and you don't know any application that you've supported. You need to have a few applications that you've supported. SSMS is not an application. SSRS is not an application, right? Those are not applications we're talking about. We're talking about something like SharePoint.
Mm.
SharePoint is an application that has its own application server and connects to the database. You, the database administrator, you support that SharePoint. So if the SharePoint administrator have an issue not being able to connect, they're going to call you. So you, on the other side, you don't necessarily need to know how SharePoint works, but you support the SharePoint on the back end because that's the application that is the application that the database is supporting. That's one. Two, ServiceNow. Everyone talks about ServiceNow, right? What do you think ServiceNow run on? ServiceNow is an application, but on the back end, it's connected to a database. And that database, my SQL Server database. So that is an application. Jira, you know Jira. What does Jira connect to? It connects to an application, right? All of you talked about monitoring tool, external monitoring tools like Redgate, SentryOne, all those external tools. Do you think they run in air? No, they have a back end. They connect to a database. And that is an application that you, database administrator, will support. And then you can talk about other, you can just leave it at that level and talk about other that for security reasons, I don't want to disclose the names and leave it there. Okay. But at least have some names that you can talk about.
Okay, sir.
Okay? So we'll talk about what? Jira, ServiceNow, SharePoint,
Redgate, SolarWinds.
Monitoring tool, SolarWinds, Redgate, Idera. Idera is one that really needs a lot. It runs on database and SQL Server. Idera monitoring tool, you know, and things like that. And there are other ones that I will be bringing up as time goes on to you. But just think about it. For example, any company, if you have ever worked out there, any company that you log onto that has something that someone is doing anything with. For example, if you're working for a call center, that call center app connects to a database. If you are working maybe for Salesforce, that's an application. I can say I've supported Salesforce. You can add Salesforce in the list of applications that you supported. Right? You can talk about Documentum. Documentum is an application where companies use it a lot for documentation purposes. Okay? And so on. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is question to ask during app installation. If you're doing an app installation, I need to ask questions. What are the questions that you need to ask? This is something that you have to pay attention to. If I am in that meeting and they just say, hey, Grace, a new application is coming in, you are going to be the database administrator for this role. What are some of the things that you need to know? First, you need to do what is called a database questionnaire. I've sent today. That database questionnaire will help you build your own environment because you don't manage the application, you manage the database. So you need to make sure that the database is ready to host the new application that's coming in. So first, I need to send them a question and find out from them. What is the name of this application? Is it a vendor written or in-house written? Okay. Compatibility issues. This application, what SQL Server version is this application compatible with? Because that will help me know what version to install. 3, is this application supported in the cloud or only on-prem? Okay, so that I know where to host this application. You need to ask questions about criticality level of this application. We call it data classification. Data classification simply means, is this application going to be hosted on the standalone environment or a cluster environment? Because then you need to know that, am I building a standalone environment or am I building a cluster environment? So that you begin to know how many servers am I requesting for this application that's coming in. I need to know about disaster recovery classification for this application, right? What kind of DR am I going to plan for this? Am I going to just make it have backups somewhere else? Am I going to maybe have it always on, combined with log shipping? Or if it's a standalone, do I just want to have the server log ship somewhere for DR purpose? I need to know those things because I have to build the environment for them, right? I need to know about the SLA for this application. Well, what is the RPO and RTO for this application? Companies don't have one SLA for every single app. Every app has its own SLA. So for every single application, I will develop its own SLA. Because from application A, I might be running the backups every 1 hour. Application 2, maybe every 5 minutes. Application 3, maybe every 1 week. So every single app will have its own SLA developed during that meeting. Okay. So once I have all this in place, I am going to go in now and request, first of all, let's build the servers. I request for the servers to be built. I need Windows Server 2019, and I also need SQL Server 2019 media so I can install. If I'm building based on the data classification and always on environment, I need 2 servers or 3 servers, maybe for 3 nodes or 2 nodes. I need to know that. Now, I will also need to make sure that if I am building an always on environment for this server, right? I need to make sure that I need to know how many nodes and what will be the DR for this always on. Am I using the 3rd node for DR purposes, or I'm using log shipping for DR purposes for this? So once I have that request sent to the server team and the server is built for me, either with as a cluster environment or as a standalone environment, I am going to go ahead and request for a service account. I need to have a service account. You don't use one service account for every single application. Each application is coming in has its own service account, which you need to request. So I need to have a service account. And this service account, once I have SQL Server installed, I need, during that data classification, I need to know what is the permission needed by this service account. It's read only, okay, read and write, or sysadmin. So I will need justification if it needs sysadmin, and that needs to be approved. Sometimes some application will need sysadmin during the application installation, and after that I will apply what is called principle of least privileges and only give the service account the right permission to run the app. But maybe during the installation, I need higher permission for the app to work. Okay, so once I have all that, the server comes back to me. I'll go in there with my service account and install SQL Server and grant the necessary permission for the service account. Once I do that, I'll give it back to this application team and ask them to try to connect to the SQL Server. Once they're tested that they can connect, everything works fine, then at that moment, we will give it to them to do the test. They will be testing and testing whatever they're testing to connect to the SQL Server and doing all the app testing. Once the app testing is done, one thing that you need to know before the testing is that where is the database coming from? Is the app going to build the database, or there's a database somewhere that I need to restore on that server? Another question that I forgot to tell you is, I need to figure out how many environments does this application need. Some environments, like my last company, we had like 5 environments. We had production, UAT, dev, testing, and staging, 5 environments. But it does not mean that because the company has 5 environments, that every app will come with 5 environments. Because if I say this app needs 5 environments and this app I'm building are always on and it's a 2 node, how many servers are we going to end up with? 10 servers. Because if you're using the 5 environment and each environment is using always on, it means that in test, you're going to need 2 servers. UAT, 2 servers. Dev, 2 servers. Prod, 2 servers to build that environment. It means that for one application, you have 10 servers that are running just for that one application. That's very expensive.
Yeah.
So some companies will prefer or decide to have some app run on 2 environments, some will run on 3 environments, 2 environments, or maybe just 4 or 5, depending on the criticality level of that. So you need to make sure you know that, because you need to request for the server based on how many environments this application will run on. So once we have all that built, the testing is done. Now we'll set what is called a cutover night. And I ask you that question. What are some of the things that you're going to do on a cutover night as a database administrator? On that cutover night, it depends on what you are supposed to do, whether it's a standalone environment or cluster environment, right? If you had a database already being tested in the UAT, your question will be, are we moving that database that has been tested in UAT environment to prod for the cutover night, or the database is coming from somewhere else? If it's coming from somewhere else, it means that when they say, okay, this is time to cut over, you, the database administrator, you need to get a copy of the backup and restore on that server and provide connection string to the application team. Meaning what goes on the connection string, the server name, the IP address, the database it connects to, a username and password. And then once you do that, and the server can connect, validate, and then the cutover is done and the database go live. These are some of the ways that you can manage these things. The last question today is, how do you manage disk space? Okay, if the disk space, if you're running out of disk space, how do you do it? You mentioned shrinking. No, but shrinking should be the last thing you want to do. First, I need to figure out why this is running. But first of all, I need to set up alerts so that once it hits a certain threshold, like maybe when the database hits above 30% or 80% or 90%, I should be notified. So therefore means that once I get that alert, I'll go in, I'll open the server and make sure the disk space is really that full. Because sometimes the alert is false alert. If it's really full, I'll figure out what is causing that space. Is there any open transaction? I can run DBCC open tran, right? DBCC, not check DB, open tran to check for open transactions. Because so long as a transaction is open, you can never shrink the database or the logs. So long as that transaction is still open. If I have an open transaction, I can run sp_who2 to see which transaction is running and if it has an individual or a service account. That's why service accounts are important. That's why service accounts should go per application. Because once you see the username and you identify that this username belongs to a service account for SharePoint, for example, you can talk to SharePoint team administration and say, hey guys, I realize that there is an open transaction here coming from the service account that SharePoint is using. This thing has been running for the last 12 hours. Is it okay if I go ahead and kill this? Okay. Don't think that sp_who2 only goes to individuals. Most of the time, what you're going to see is service account used by different applications. And you know who is the application owner. So you are talking to the application owner because their app has been running for such amount of time and is causing your disk to fill up. And you want to kill the transaction. They can say, oh no, we have an insert job that's been going on. It's okay, please let it run. And then you're going to keep on monitoring it and hoping that it does not fill up before the transaction terminates. If they say, no, okay, we expected this script to run for 10 minutes, to be running for 3 hours, please go ahead and kill it. Most of the time, when you kill that transaction, the space is released. Okay, so next thing, if there's no open transaction, the next thing that you need to check on that is, when was the last time this database was backed up? Or if it's been backed up, what is the frequency of the transaction log? If there's a lot happening on database and you're taking transaction log like every 5 hours or every 6 hours, maybe that frequency is not enough. Maybe I want to reduce it. Maybe I want to run it every 1 hour to make sure that it reduces the rate in which my logs is growing. Okay, so if that backup is not running that fast, I can do what is called transaction log backup on demand. That doesn't mean I'm not going to wait until the next backup run as per schedule. I'm going to run it manually. When you run it manually, we'll call it running a transaction backup on demand. So sometimes doing so will release the space. If the space is not released, then I will temporarily put my database in simple recovery mode and then shrink. If the shrinking does not give back the space, I will submit a ticket through my service now and say, this disk space is full. I can no longer get the space back. I need the space to be added. And then they will expand the disks. That is how you manage the space. And I've given you step by step. It's recorded. If you were not able to write it down, I'm putting this this record on our YouTube channel. Go to KiawiTech YouTube channel and watch this, and then you can take down your notes. All right. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
We'll stop here for
Thank
today.
you, sir.
It was a great
Thank you. That was
Thank
really
you. We need
fun.
that recording.
Can I? Please,
Thank
can I
you.
quickly ask